$28,000 for him, $5,000 for me. Same job, same company, same bullshit. That's when I decided to show them what 23 years of experience actually costs. My name's Brent Coleman, I'm 47 years old, and I've been running night operations at Apex Manufacturing for longer than some of my coworkers have been alive. Started right out of the Navy, figured I'd work there maybe 5 years while I found something better. Turns out I was pretty good at keeping million-dollar machines running when everyone else went home to their families. The thing about manufacturing is that it never sleeps. Raw materials come in on trucks at all hours. Orders need to ship by morning, and when a bearing starts making that grinding sound at 2 a.m., somebody has to know what it means and how to fix it. For 23 years, that somebody has been me. I live about 15 minutes from the plant in a house my wife Susan and I bought, when we still thought I'd get promoted to day shift management. That was before I realized that knowing how things actually work counts for less than knowing how to talk about them in meetings. Susan teaches 3rd grade at the local elementary school, gets up at 6 a.m. every day to shape young minds and deal with helicopter parents. We've got 2 kids. Danny's a sophomore at State studying engineering, and Sarah's a senior in high school looking at colleges we're trying to figure out how to afford. The mortgage isn't terrible, but it's steady. Danny's tuition is steady too, and more than we planned for when he was little, and college cost half what it does now. Sarah's been working part-time at the grocery store to help save for her own college, which makes me proud and frustrated at the same time. Proud because she's got work ethic, frustrated because kids shouldn't have to work to afford an education. That's the reality when you're 47 in America and trying to do right by your family. You work steady, you save what you can, and you hope the company that's been good to you keeps being good to you until you can retire with something resembling dignity. So when Rachel Torres called that company meeting on a Tuesday morning, I listened. Rachel's our plant manager, been there about 4 years now. She came up through some corporate development program, got her MBA while working at headquarters. Talks a lot about optimizing workflows and leveraging synergies. She's smart enough, I'll give her that, but she's never worked a production line or gotten a call at 3 a.m. because line 3 is down and the morning shift is going to be here in 4 hours expecting everything to run smooth. The meeting was right after shift change, which meant I'd been up all night and was ready to head home for some sleep. But when management calls an all-hands meeting, you show up. That's how it works when you're hourly. Rachel stood up front with her practiced smile and talked about retention initiatives and investing in our people. The kind of corporate speak that usually means someone's about to get screwed, but in a way that sounds like they're doing you a favor. We've been reviewing our critical personnel and their contributions to operational success, she said, looking around the room like she was sharing good news. Based on this analysis, we're implementing retention bonuses for key team members, critical personnel. I almost laughed out loud at that one. If critical meant anything around here, it meant the guy who shows up when everything's broken and somehow gets it fixed before anyone important notices there was a problem. We had a small crew covering nights. Me, Landon Pierce, who mostly worked days but sometimes helped with evening coverage. Jerry Martinez, who ran quality control, and a couple other guys who rotated in when someone was sick or on vacation. Landon was 29, had his MBA from the State University, and always talked about process optimization and data-driven solutions. Nice enough guy, I suppose, but he couldn't tell you why a bearing was overheating just by listening to it, or spot a pressure gauge reading that was technically within limits but heading toward trouble. Rachel explained they'd be contacting people individually about their bonus amounts. Keep it confidential, she said. Professional courtesy. I'd been around long enough to know what that really meant, so nobody compares notes and realizes how unfair the whole thing is. The meeting broke up and I headed home, thinking maybe this was finally some recognition for all those nights when I'd kept the plant running while other people slept. Susan was getting ready for school when I walked in, and she could see I was in a better mood than usual after a long shift. "Good night?" she asked, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "Maybe," I said. "Company's talking about retention bonuses. Recognition for critical personnel." She smiled and kissed my cheek. About time they realized what they've got. I grabbed a few hours of sleep, then spent the afternoon working on the lawnmower that had been acting up. There's something satisfying about mechanical problems you can actually solve with the right tools and a little know-how. Unlike people problems, which seem to get more complicated the longer you think about them. Around 5 p.m., my phone rang. Landon, he sounded excited. "Brent, man, you hear anything yet about the bonuses?" "Not yet," I said. "You just got off the phone with Rachel." "Dude, they really came through. Really showed some love." Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. "That's great, Landon. What kind of numbers are we talking about?" "I probably shouldn't say over the phone," he said, but I could hear him grinning. "Let's just say it's more than I make in a quarter, way more." After we hung up, I sat in my garage with a wrench in my hand and tried to do the math. Landon made about 60 grand a year, so more than a quarter would be north of 15,000, probably a lot north. That evening, Susan and I were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching Sarah practice driving in our driveway. She'd gotten her learner's permit and was determined to master parallel parking before her road test. "Think she'll pass the first time?" Susan asked. "She's got the Coleman determination," I said. "She'll figure it out." Speaking of determination, you hear anything more about that bonus? Not yet. But Landon got his call. Sounds like it's substantial. Susan squeezed my hand. "Whatever it is, we'll make it work for the family. Maybe finally get that kitchen table we've been talking about." Our kitchen table was older than our marriage, a hand-me-down from Susan's parents that had seen better decades. We'd been saying we'd replace it for about 5 years now, but somehow there was always something more important that needed the money first. That night, I couldn't sleep well. Something about the way Landon had sounded, the way Rachel had talked about critical personnel, didn't sit right. I'd been in the Navy long enough to know when someone was setting you up for bad news, and the warning signs were all there. The call came the next morning around 10 a.m. I was in the kitchen having coffee and reading the paper when my phone rang. Rachel Torres' video call from her office. "Brent, good morning. Thanks for making time to chat." I could see her sitting behind her desk with that same practice smile from the meeting. Behind her on the wall was her MBA diploma and some kind of leadership award from corporate headquarters. "Morning, Rachel. What's on your mind?" "Well, as you know, we talked yesterday about retention bonuses for our critical personnel." She paused like she was delivering good news. "I'm happy to tell you that you're definitely part of that group." I nodded and waited. In the Navy, they taught you to let people finish talking before you respond. Sometimes what they don't say tells you more than what they do. Based on your years of service and your contributions to night operations, we're prepared to offer you a retention bonus. Another pause, bigger smile. "We're really excited about this. I appreciate that." "Rachel, what are we looking at?" $5,000. It comes with a 2-year retention agreement, same as everyone else in the program. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she'd said 15 or 50. I waited for her to correct herself. The way you wait for someone to realize they just said something completely insane. She didn't. 5,000, she repeated, still smiling like she'd just handed me a lottery ticket, and it comes with the same commitment period as the other participants. I stared at her through the screen. 23 years I'd been there. 23 years of Christmas shifts because the machines don't take holidays. 23 years of 3 a.m. phone calls when something broke and nobody else knew how to fix it. 23 years of training new people, covering for sick coworkers, and keeping production lines running while the day shift got credit for meeting quotas. And they thought my loyalty was worth the price of a decent used car. "Okay," I said, because I couldn't trust my voice to say anything else without saying too much. Rachel's smile flickered just a little. "I want you to know this reflects budget considerations, not your performance. You're extremely valued here, Brent. We really can't imagine night operations without you, right?" So valued, they just told me exactly what I was worth compared to a guy who'd been there 3 years and needed me to show him where the electrical panels were. "I'll need to review the agreement," I said. "Of course, I'm sending it over now. Just so you know, we're hoping to have these signed and processed by the end of the week." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee mug. It was one of those Father's Day gifts from the kids, said "World's Greatest Dad" in fading letters. Susan had left for school already. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the sound of my own breathing. I opened the retention agreement on my phone. 2 years minimum commitment. Can't quit early without paying the money back in full. Can't work for a competitor within 50 miles. Can't discuss the terms with other employees. They wanted me locked in tight, but they wanted to keep themselves free to do whatever they pleased. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from Landon. Just a screenshot, no words needed. His retention agreement signed and ready to submit. $28,000. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. $28,000 for a guy who'd been there 3 years, who worked mostly day shift, who called me whenever something went wrong because he didn't know how to handle it himself. 28,000 versus 5,000. Same job, same company, same retention program. I called in sick that night. First time in about 2 years, and I had plenty of sick time saved up. I told Jerry I wasn't feeling well and needed him to handle things. He didn't ask questions. Jerry was good that way. Instead of going to work, I sat in my home office and pulled up everything I could find about my employment history. Performance reviews, incident reports, training records, overtime logs, 23 years of documentation showing exactly what I'd contributed to that company. The numbers told a story. If you knew how to read them, every major breakdown in the last 5 years had happened on night shift. Every major save had my initials somewhere in the paperwork. I'd trained 14 different people over the years, written half the procedures that day shift used, and covered more holiday shifts than anyone else in the department. But according to the retention program, I was worth 1/5 of what they were paying to keep Landon Pierce. Susan came home around 6 p.m. and found me still at the computer, surrounded by printouts and spreadsheets. "You're supposed to be at work," she said, setting down her school bag, called in sick. She looked at the papers spread across the desk. "This about the bonus?" I handed her my phone with the agreement pulled up, watched her face as she read it. "5,000, she said quietly. "Landon got 28. Susan sat down hard in the chair next to me. We'd been married 22 years, and I could see her doing the same math I'd been doing all day. 5,000 wouldn't even cover one semester of Danny's tuition. It wouldn't fix the roof leak we'd been ignoring for 6 months. It definitely wouldn't buy that kitchen table she'd mentioned. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means they think 23 years of experience is worth less than 3 years of an MBA. What are you going to do?" I looked at all the paperwork spread out in front of me. Evidence of 2 decades of loyal service reduced to a number that wouldn't cover a month of our family's expenses. I'm going to think about it. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the retention agreement, about the 2-year commitment, about the clause that said I couldn't work for a competitor if I left. They wanted to lock me in at a price that told me exactly how little they thought I was worth. Around 11 p.m., my phone started buzzing with alerts from the plant. Equipment alarms, the kind that usually meant something was starting to go wrong with line 3. The main extrusion line had been acting up for weeks. I'd been telling Rachel we needed to replace some worn bearings before they failed completely. But she kept saying we had to make do until the next maintenance budget cycle. I looked at the alerts, looked at my unsigned retention agreement, and made a decision that surprised me. I turned my phone to silent and went to bed. For 23 years, I'd been the guy who answered every call, fixed every problem, covered every emergency. Tonight, I decided to see what happened when the guy who actually knew how things worked didn't. The next morning, my phone looked like it had epilepsy. 17 missed calls, 31 text messages, and enough alert notifications to crash a smaller device. I made coffee and read through them while Susan got ready for work. Jerry had texted around midnight, line 3, acting up, "Can you call in?" Then 1:15 a.m., getting worse, "Need advice." Then 2:30 a.m. called Landon, but he's not answering. System showing pressure warnings, then 3 to 45 a.m., had to do emergency shutdown. This is bad. The missed calls started around 4 a.m. Jerry, then Rachel, then someone from day shift management, then Rachel again. By 6 a.m., they'd moved on to calling Mason Carter, the VP of manufacturing, which meant the situation had gone from problem to crisis. Susan poured her coffee and looked at my phone, which was still buzzing with new messages. "You gonna answer that?" she asked. Eventually, Brent. I looked up from the screen. Susan had that expression she gets when she's trying to figure out if I'm being stupid or strategic. After 22 years of marriage, she usually guesses right. They had their chance to show me what I'm worth, I said. Last night was their opportunity to see what that's actually worth to them. Around 9 a.m., Mason Carter called. I'd talked to Mason maybe 6 times in all my years at the company. He was one of those VP types who came up through consulting, knew a lot about efficiency metrics and not much about how machinery actually worked. "Brent, we've got a situation at the plant." Rachel said, "You might have some insight into what's happening with line 3. Insight. Not expertise, not solutions. Insight." "Yeah, I know what's wrong," I said. "Been telling people about it for 3 weeks. What's your assessment?" "Bearing assembly on the main extruder is shot. Probably seized up completely by now if Jerry had to do an emergency shutdown. You're looking at a full replacement, minimum 2 days if you can get the parts. Can you come in? We really need to get this resolved." I thought about that retention agreement sitting unsigned in my email. Thought about Landon's screenshot showing 28,000 reasons why the company valued his potential over my proven track record. "I could," I said, "but I won't." Long silence on the other end. "Then what do you mean you won't? I mean, this is exactly what that retention bonus was supposed to cover. Emergency response, critical knowledge, keeping the operation running. You made your decision about what that's worth to you, Brent. This isn't the time for games. It's not a game, Mason. It's business. Same way it was business when you decided my 23 years of experience was worth 1/5 what you're paying someone who doesn't know a bearing from a belt tensioner." I hung up before he could respond. By noon, they'd brought in outside contractors. Hartwell Industrial Services, probably costing them $300 an hour plus parts. I knew the guys who ran Hartwell. Good outfit. But they'd need time to study the system, figure out the specs, order parts that I could have told them we needed 3 weeks ago. Susan called during her lunch break. "How's your sick day going?" "Educational." "The plant called the house. Twice. They'll figure it out, will they?" I looked out my kitchen window toward the industrial park where Apex Manufacturing sat quiet in the middle of the day when it should have been running at full capacity. Eventually that afternoon, I drove over to Jerry's house. He lived about 10 minutes from me, had been working quality control at Apex for about 8 years. Good guy, steady worker, the kind of person who showed up every day and did his job without drama. I found him in his garage working on an old Chevy. He looked tired. Rough night? I asked. Worst I've seen in years. Everything just fell apart after you didn't answer your phone. What happened? Jerry wiped his hands on a shop rag and shook his head. Pressure started climbing around midnight. I followed the troubleshooting guide, but nothing worked. Called you, no answer. Called Landon. He said he'd be right in, then never showed. By 3 a.m., I was watching gauges hit red and didn't know what to do except shut everything down. You did the right thing, did I? Because Rachel's acting like I broke it myself. They've got contractors crawling all over the place, and nobody seems to know what they're looking at. I leaned against his workbench. Jerry, that bearing's been going bad for a month. I've written 3 reports about it. Rachel kept saying we'd address it in the next budget cycle. So this was preventable, completely. Jerry was quiet for a minute, turning a wrench over in his hands. You know what really gets me? Landon never showed up, said he'd be right in, then nothing. I was there by myself dealing with a crisis, and the guy who's supposed to be backup just didn't come. Where was he? Don't know. But this morning he's in meetings with management, probably explaining how this could have been prevented with better process documentation. That evening my phone rang again. Landon this time, Brent. Man, what the hell? They're saying you're not answering calls. That's correct, dude. We need you. This whole thing is a nightmare. Jerry shut down the line and now nobody knows how to restart it properly. What did the troubleshooting guide say? It's outdated. Half the steps don't even apply to our current setup. I almost smiled at that. Who wrote that guide, Landon? Silence. That's right, I did. 3 years ago. And I've been asking Rachel to let me update it ever since. But she keeps saying we need to focus on production quotas instead of paperwork. Come on, man. Don't be like this. You know I respect what you do I? Because your bonus says otherwise. I didn't make that decision. No, but you didn't question it either. You just took your 28 grand and told me the company knows who matters. Another pause. Look, I'll owe you one big time. I thought about all the times I'd stayed late while he left early, all the times he'd presented my solutions in meetings like they were his ideas, all the times I'd covered his mistakes without taking credit. I'm done owing people, Landon. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've got an MBA and 28,000 reasons to figure this out yourself. I hung up and turned my phone off completely. The next morning, Susan brought me the local newspaper with my coffee. Page 3, manufacturing plant shut down, enters 3rd day. The article mentioned supply chain disruptions, customer complaints, and ongoing technical difficulties. It didn't mention that one guy walking away had brought a whole operation to its knees, but people in town were starting to talk. My neighbor Dave stopped by that afternoon. He worked day shift in the shipping department. Heard you're not feeling well, he said. Getting better. He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. Funny thing, 20 years I've been there and I never realized how much one person could know about keeping that place running. You'd be surprised. Maybe not as surprised as management. That evening, Travis Bennett knocked on my door. Travis worked for the local union, used to run a lathe before he got into representing workers. We'd talked a few times over the years, but always casual conversation. Heard you might be having some disagreements with management, he said. I invited Travis in for coffee and told him the whole story. He took notes in a small notebook, asked good questions, didn't make any promises he couldn't keep. Thing is, Brent, this kind of situation is exactly what we're here for. Unequal compensation for equal work, possible age discrimination. You might have a case if you want to pursue it. I just want to be treated fairly. I understand, but sometimes fair treatment requires legal pressure. Companies like this, they don't change because it's the right thing to do. They change because it costs them money not to. What would that involve? Documentation, interviews, probably some formal complaints with the labor board. Could take months to resolve, but it sends a message. I thought about Susan and the kids, about the mortgage and Danny's tuition. What about my job? They can't retaliate legally. Doesn't mean they won't try, but we'd be watching for that. Travis left his card and told me to think it over. No pressure, he said, but these things don't get better by themselves. By Friday, the plant had been down for 5 days. The local newspaper ran another story. Apex manufacturing shutdown continues, customers affected. This time they mentioned potential layoffs if operations didn't resume soon. The article quoted Mason Carter saying they were working around the clock to resolve technical difficulties. Technical difficulties. That's what they were calling it. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Mason Carter again, but this time his tone was completely different. Brent, I'm going to be straight with you. We made a mistake. The bonus amounts, they didn't reflect the actual value different people bring to operations. No kidding. What would it take to get you back, realistically? I'd had almost a week to think about it. I want the same bonus Landon got, I want immediate vesting of my pension benefits, and I want a written acknowledgement that the original offer was based on incomplete information. That's substantial. Mason, your plant's been shut down for 5 days. You've got contracts you can't fulfill, customers asking questions, and contractors billing you round the clock. What's substantial? He was quiet for almost a minute. I could hear him talking to someone else, hand covering the phone. Let me see what I can do, he said finally. That weekend, Susan and I sat down with the kids and had a real conversation about what was happening. Danny was home for the weekend, and Sarah had been hearing things at school from other kids whose parents worked at various places around town. Are you going to lose your job? Sarah asked. I don't know yet, I told her honestly, but whatever happens, we'll figure it out as a family. Maybe this is a good thing, Danny said. I mean, if they don't appreciate what you do, maybe you should work somewhere that does. Susan reached over and squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, we'll support it. Monday morning, I got an email from corporate HR. Full bonus package matching Landon's amount, immediate pension vesting, and a clarification letter regarding the initial compensation analysis. They wanted me to start that afternoon. I read it twice, then called the number at the bottom of the email. I appreciate the offer, I told the HR representative, but I won't be accepting it. I'm sorry, I don't understand. These were the terms you requested. They were, and the fact that you can offer them now proves they were always available. You just didn't think I was worth it until it cost you more to undervalue me than to pay me fairly. Mr. Coleman, we're trying to make this right. No, you're trying to fix your production line. There's a difference. What would it take for you to reconsider? I thought about Travis Bennett's business card, about the union representation, about the legal case I probably had. Then I thought about Susan getting up every morning to teach 3rd grade, about Danny studying engineering, about Sarah saving money from her grocery store job for college. Nothing, I said, but thank you for the offer. That same afternoon, my phone rang again, different number this time. Brent, this is Corey Mitchell. I'm a recruiter we talked briefly about 6 months ago when you were exploring options. I remember I heard through the grapevine that you might be available. I've got a position that could be interesting, day shift supervisor at Steelwork Industries, about 20 minutes north of you. They're looking for someone with your exact background. What's the compensation like? Base salary about 45% more than your current rate. Full benefits, solid pension plan, and they actually value experience over politics. The plant manager there is old school. He came up through the ranks himself. When could I start? How about next week? I took the job. 3 weeks later, I was working day shift at a plant where people said good morning when they saw me, where my suggestions were taken seriously, and where nobody questioned whether 23 years of experience was worth something. When equipment needed maintenance, they listened. When I recommended process improvements, they implemented them. When I trained new people, they gave me credit for it. Apex eventually got their line running again, took them 12 days and close to $400,000 in lost production, contractor fees, and customer penalties. Landon lasted the full 2 years of his retention agreement, but never got another bonus. Last I heard, they'd hired 3 people to cover what I used to handle by myself, and they're still having problems with equipment that should have been maintained years ago. Rachel Torres left for other opportunities about 8 months later. The retention program got quietly canceled after some uncomfortable questions from corporate about how bonus amounts were determined. As for me, the first time someone called with a technical question at my new job, they actually listened to my answer and thanked me for the input. No politics, no games, no wondering if my experience mattered, just people who understood that knowledge has value and loyalty works both ways. The funny thing is, walking out wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing I didn't have to prove my worth by accepting less than it. They wanted to keep the wrong guy cheap, and I finally stopped pretending that was my problem to solve. Some lessons cost $5,000 to learn. Others cost $400,000 and 12 days of downtime. I know which one I'd rather pay. Your value isn't determined by what someone's willing to pay you. It's proven by what it costs them when you're gone. The most expensive employee isn't the one who demands their worth. It's the one who walks away because you refuse to recognize it.